Skulls, not nifrad.
I guess that's Kedusha.
Absolutely. In Shulchan Aruch it says. Did you know that in Shulchan Aruch and the Rishul is supposed to have a whole bunch of windows?
Yes, I know that. Oh. You told me that.
You're supposed to be able to see the sky.
You know, I guess I have to stand in the corner and face it. You know,
What?
I can have my own privacy.
Your own
like,
view.
Like the holy man that sat he was blindfolded, that the world wouldn't interrupt him.
That's right. You know the story with Reb Mordechai and Reb Chaim?
It's a different story. Is that alluding to the story I just mentioned?
I know what story you're referring to.
I'm talking about where the Baal Shem Tov came to this man that placed himself with blindfolds, and he never was interrupted by any kind of mundane activities. And Baal Shem Tov came over to him, and he said, "When are you going to allow the Eivter to bring down holiness into the world? Because your isolation doesn't allow for this."
That story I never heard, but there's a long story of the Hashem Tov Talmud, Reb Mordechai. He became a Talmud Baal Shem Tov, and then he went to look for his Chaverim, and one of his Chaverim, they were big Lomdim, Reb Chaim. And he was sitting blindfolded in Bismedrash. He was a very holy man, and ultimately Reb Chaim took off his bandage and became a human being.
Mm.
And Reb Mordechai showed Reb Chaim, they were sitting and learning. There was the whole time. Mordechai showed him that he is really an apikoros.
It took a while. He had to work on it.
Yeah. All right, so we are actually on page Yud, something in the middle. So Hashemayim become mishtachvim. Okay, so we are just about a third from the top on page Yud. The line begins Sholamato. The last thing we discussed was the singing that the Nivroim Lamato, and Nivroim here below, also have a sense of Beetle Tolokus. All right, so we'll start there. I was going to talk about about the sense of Mahus. We'll still come to it. Okay. So we are in the middle of this presentation in Yoshis HaKabbalah, which will ultimately be discussed here. This is all the Indian, the effect of the Shema upon the Shemban. And the manner in which it is mislabish and nichlol, hu kfi ma shenimshach mishema hachodosh hayetze mitzchot diyak. Okay, you can translate it for yourselves. Hu melech shmini, which is the eighth melech of the Tohu Hadar. Shezehu shelo shemokir hatmidi de bechinas hatikun. This is ultimately the source of tikkun. When Hadar HaTorah was being formed, so Jacobson was sitting and discussing what name to give it, and Jacob says, "Well, you have to give it Hadar Melech Hashmini." That's how the name, huh?
Melech Hashmini.
Yeah.
It's king.
The source of tikkun. Umisham nimshach eifon hatikun the Shemban. From there comes the tikkun, the hascholos hoya hatikun l'mayla me'atzilus. The beginning of the tikkun Shemban was higher than Atzilus. Hainu shenase habitul kol kach. The b'chinas Shemban, where the beetle became to such a degree higher than Atzilus, means he became such a degree beetle ad shenichla b'chinas elokus shel l'mayla me'atzilus. So that Shemban was incorporated in Elokus, that's even higher than Atzilus. V'hakach nistakein liz habitul kifi hamadriget Atzilus, and afterwards it came down and acquired the beetle according to the level of Atzilus. V'ashar nofali brio, and that part of the Shemban that was not Nichel and Atzilus fell into brio. Ad shehapseles hagas, so that the coarse refuse, nofel lamato, fell all the way down below lehistakim be'elam hatachton, to become perfected in this lower world. Shagam bohem yesh bechinas habitul, that even in the lowest presence in the world, even in our world, there is also bechinas habitul, this element of beetle. Ad habitul hayesher achroin, all the way to the very last and lowest element of beetle. V'hu dekora b'moedim. And this is what is referred to, dekora b'moedim. He kneeled in medim. When you say medim, we kneel. In other words, you kneel when you mention Medim Anachnu Loch. That although it is merely a physical bowing, nonetheless, this is an aspect of beetle, even though it's a very superior supervision. Nevertheless, the beetle is starting al dezeh and becomes corrected and perfected thereby. Mandal lekora, and the Gemara says mandal lekora, one who does not kneel in medim, she'ein be beetle klal, which means he has absolutely no sense of beetle. Einay bebchinas hatikun, he's not included in this bechina of tikun. Tikel hatikun hu habitul hanase al de haora shema, because tikkun in principle is the beetle that is affected by the haora of the presence of Shema. Behine hamshoch azui hitmidis. This Hamshocha is constant. Shenim Shachto mit Kifi Seder Ishtalshel. This aspect of Bitl from Shema is constantly present. Kifi Seder HaHishtalshelus, which means that this Ha'ora and the effect of this Ha'ora and the Bitl that it affects is Kifi Seder HaHishtalshelus, follows the order of Hishtalshelus, from higher to low. Mikeser, from Keser leChochma or Bina, into Chochma, Michochma Bina leZun, and then Chochma Bina into Zun, and then the last thing Matzilus libiyah, from Matzilus into Biyah, as we said before. Okmei came Ba'aliyas v'Yizkalos Atachtim ha'Elyin, Canal. The same is when it goes from the bottom upwards. It's also true in a form of Seder Hishtalshelus. Rak, except sheyesh hefreish be'efen ha'amshocha mechochma bina lezo laha'amshocha shemikeser la'chochma. Except that there is a principal difference in the manner that the hamshocha that takes place from chochma and bina into zoh, relative in comparison to hamshocha that comes from keser into chochma. Even though we're saying that this is Seder Hishtalshelus, but there are categorical differences. The Mechochma Bina leZo, because from Chochma Bina into Zo, Ha'amshocha hi memahus limahus. The Hamshocha is an essential hamshocha, from mahus to mahus, presence to presence. V'hainu shemahus ha'ora dechochma bina nimshach bezo. The very effect, chochma bina nimshach bezo. Okay, this is going to be discussed a little bit. As for example, Miseichel Lemidas, this is then from Chochma Bina into Zoh. Miseichel Lemidas. The Hamshocha that comes from Seichel into Midas. Coming from Seichel into Midas already represents an element of Bitl. Midas, by virtue of their own nature, would go unabridged, unbridled. Seichel gives it a direction, gives it a purpose. And this purpose and this effect of Seichel in Midas, there is an Haremahuz Ha'oras HaSeichel. Nimshach b'Midas. I'm going to stop a little bit and discuss this in a moment. The mahus of the ha'or of the seichel, nimshach b'Midas, is drawn into Midas. V'zehu ha'nikra hislapshus, and this is what's defined as referred to as hislapshus. We started yesterday a little bit because it's only a quick allusion over here. Nevertheless, here it's time to discuss a little bit. And there's Metzius Emahus, which we discussed many times. And to give us a real sense of the difference, Metzius and Mahus, I want to go to a very fundamental aspect. We mentioned recently a lot that which is mentioned in Chassidus, Kol Dover Roitze B'Kiyumoi, that everything Roitze wants its continued presence, but not really continued presence. The emphasis over there is its continued presence. It wants that what it is should continue. Not that it is, that something is there, but what it is, kiyumoi, its kiyum, should persist. In contrast to the way this principle is interpreted in the world, is entirely stripped of any significance. It's just, it wants to be. This is the survival element. Yotze b'kiyumi is not the element of survival. Yotze b'kiyumi means to be what it is. Like we said many times, what is the primary desire of a human being? To be? No. Primary desire of a human being is to be a human being. There is a mahus element, not just a metzius element. Like we pointed out from our very simple illustration, that if you are a guest and you have a host and he gives you everything that he promised to give you lunch, and it's a hefty lunch. If the human element is eliminated, if the host leaves you alone, then you're at a total loss. Why? You can still survive. You can still eat your lunch and go play baseball. Why is it such a big loss when he leaves you? Because to be the human, the element of what a human being is, that is the desire, the rights. Why? This goes very deep, because that has an element of reality, an element of godliness. This is what is inherent in the Rotzen, called Dover Roitze B'Kiyumei. This Rotzen is a godly gift in everything. This is the godly presence in everything. Because everything, a rock wants to be a rock, because this is what the godly element in this rock is, the Chayes Eliki. In everything there's a Chayes Eliki, as we learned in time. This is a pshat. In contrast to when they talk about survival, there is no mehus, no element of oir. What do you want? Nothing. There is no sense of any of what, where this is coming, what this is about, what this presence is about. There's no mahus. It's a total misrepresentation, misunderstanding, and it has horrible consequences. Mitzvah will be mevared that too. This is what they said, it slaps a seichel in midas. The seichel is mislabish in midas, which means the seichel illuminates and brings a sense in the beauty of midas. It gives midas a seichel quality. It doesn't just say this is right and this is wrong. It actually enlivens it. It gives it a chayas. So even in seichel and midas, which are vastly different in different levels, What does Seichel provide for Midas? To know that this food is tasty. Somebody hasn't muted the phone. Please mute your phone. To know that this food is tasty, you don't need seichel for that. Your palate will tell you that. Seichel provides for midas an overall reality, an overall significance. Like the Baal Shem Tov said, "Tzadik oichel l'seiva nafshay." A tzaddik eats l'seiva nafshay because of the benefit that the nefesh has out of this bitter on Amaycha. Seichel provides the midas a sense that what I'm going after is not just because it is pleasant to me, because I want it, but because there is a true significance to it. There's a seichel value to it. There's a reality to it, a godly reality. Doesn't that say? When one sits down to a Friday night, to a Shabbos meal, there's a seichel element in it. It's a meal, but it has a completely different significance. That's a seichel element that gives it a seichel quality, and it's mislapshus in midas. To the point where you say, no, the food has to be very tasty, nicely prepared, nicely served, and all those things. Why? Not because that enhances the food, but because that brings out the seichel element within the food. It's l'kovet Shabbos, not l'kovet the food. Those are the slapshus mehus. The mehus haseichel is mislabish in the midas. The midas sense, they're not told about it. They sense the sichli element. Even though the sichli is shaloi mi'erach to midas. Midas is entirely subjective. But they sense that there's an elevation, and purification of the midas. So this is how the slapshus is from seichel into midas, from chochma bina into midas. Masha ein kain, okay. We are on the line b'midah, beginning the word b'midas. So nikra mislapshus. Masha ein kain b'keser l'chochma. We have the hamshoch from keser to chochma is in a different manner. So there we have the pasuk says "Chochma meyayin timotzi." The chochma is found and comes forth from Ayin. What does it mean, meyayin? So he explains. Rak mibchinas Ayin, only from the bechina of Ayin, loy mimahuz haoras hakesef. Not from the mahus, from the very presence of haoras hakesef, which means that as pure as chochma is, chochma does not have a means to absorb haoras hakesef. It can see it, but it cannot have it. And therefore, the chochma ayin timotzi. There is a sense in chochma that it does not really have a basis to stand on. It's just, this is the way I see it. Midos and Seichel, there is a real relationship there. Seichel is mislabish in the Midos, and there is a chayas of Seichel in the Midos. Whereas the Chaoras HaKesef, the Chochma sees Chaoras HaKesef, because Chochma is the element of Bittul, the nature of Chochma is Bittul. The nature of Chochma is self-effacement, to see what there is to see. So therefore it sees the HaKesef. Not that it can relate to that unit. Like, for example, what we said just a moment ago. Called over Roitze B'Kiyumi. Everything wants its kiyum. The whole principle of Rotzoin, in the real sense of Rotzoin, which is a Koyach HaNefesh, he wants, not because it makes him feel good, not the wanting as we have it in our common experience, which is really rooted in that Rotzen. But we are very far from relating to it and to understanding it. A Rotzen is, I could say, a testimonial to the reality of the Nefesh. He wants, and the question of why is totally out of order. There is no why. He's alive. He is a godly. Therefore he wants. Therefore he has this rotz. He wants to be what he is. Like I said, he wants to be what he is. Because that's what he is. This is what God gave him, that God put into him. This Rotzain, as I said, is simply an allusion, a testimonial of the godly presence in everything. That element is not possible to be understood. Chochmah can recognize its presence and can be subservient to it and bottled to it, but it cannot possibly absorb it. It's a non-entity. It's a godly thing. And godliness is not a mitzias. Non-mitzias cannot come into seichel.
But seichel directs everything according to this truth. So how does seichel know?
That's what's on the beetle.
So it's this truth directing everything through seichel?
Yeah. Seichel is the only means that by which you can ultimately translate all the way to the bottom.
But where is that sense that this fits, this doesn't fit? This fits, this doesn't fit. Where is the rejection, the biur? Where is the biur? What selects? This is according to this truth, this is not according to this truth. This definition, it has to be misgabish in some way in seichel, for seichel to be mivarer in accordance with it.
Take an example of the halacha that is time is up. Halacha we speak about borrowing an object. You know what I'm talking about? So the seichel senses, recognizes that if you would say that yes, you can take it back, that's not according to the truth. Because then it means that it's completely yours. Well, there's no such thing. That's not true. All right. This is it for this morning. To go to the topic.
How do you see that in the words Chacha, the Ayin Shemotzi? How do you see the bittul in
Ayin is Ayin. Ayin means nothing.
so that
It
can
comes
only
and
can only
Timotze, what Timotze means, it is found. It's like as if you found something that was not there before.
Ba boom bum ba boom bum ba boom bum bum ba ba dum bum bum ba boom bum 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 ba boom bum a boom boom ba ba dum ba